I've been given the honor of introducing Peter Schaar, who is the second recipient of the Brandeis Award this evening. Peter Schaar is the chairman of the European Academy for Freedom of Information and Data Protection, which is a post he took up as the chairman in 2013. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the European Academy because I would imagine many of you in the audience don't know it. It was founded in 2003, and it covers both freedom of information and data protection and privacy. And when I was looking at their website recently, I noticed that, and I said to Peter, they use an expression that I often use. I say that data protection and freedom of information are two sides of the same coin. So in other words, for the individual, they should have privacy and protection of data, and so they can have obscurity or opacity with regard to their personal information and their personal life. With regard to government, we have freedom of information laws so that government becomes transparent to us and we have the ability to gather information about our government and know about its activities. But often nowadays, we see these things flipped and government is opaque and the individual is laid bare. So it's very important to think of them as two sides of the same coin and to keep that balance correctly in place. So this institute, the European Academy, advocates strengthening of transparency and the protection of privacy. And it is a platform in Europe and in Germany, obviously where it's located, for strategic discussion of science, politics, and society on those two subjects. Now, Peter Schaar, before he took up that post in 2013, was the Federal Commissioner for Data Protection and Freedom of Information of Germany for 10 years, from 2003 through 2013. He left that post to take up his new role as chairman after 10 years as the Federal Data Protection Commissioner in Germany, and he left very big shoes to fill. So he served 2 5-year terms. So in December 2003, he took up the post of Federal Data Protection Commissioner. And then in 2006, he also became the Federal Commissioner for Freedom of Information. In 2008, he was reconfirmed in his office as a chairman of both of those, as a commissioner of both of those roles for another 5-year term, and by the German Bundestag in a nearly unanimous vote. And their politics are maybe not quite as fractious as American congressional politics, but they're a bit, controversial. So that's a real honor to him that the vote to reappoint him was nearly unanimous. Peter Schaar was born in Berlin, and I'm going to give you a little bit of his background, but you'll see that data protection is a recurring theme throughout his working life. So from 1980 to 86, he worked in the administrative service of the free and Hanseatic town of Hamburg. From 1986 to 2002, he worked at Hamburg's Data Protection Commissioner's Office. From 2002 to 2003, he was a managing director of a consulting company for data protection, and he also worked over the years at various points as a lecturer at the University of Hamburg. Peter has already received a number of awards, and I'll mention 2 of them. He received the prize of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, which is the prize for the political book of 2008, for his book, The End of Privacy, which I recommend to you. He also received the Eco-Internet Award in 2008. That was a very big year for you, which is a special award of the German internet businesses. I want to go beyond his biography a bit and tell you some things that his biography or his specific background, as I've just outlined it, which is what you would, our normal biographical information, and tell you a bit more about him and the outsized role in the data protection and privacy firmament that he has occupied. He has been a guiding star, not only in Germany, not only in Europe, but throughout the world in this period from 2003, especially onward until now. He has been very unafraid to stick to his principles and to be vocal in a reasoned and consistent way. He has been a de facto leader of the Global Privacy Club and an intellectual father for all of us. He is open to learning and questioning, seizes a new technology, tries to understand them and the implications for privacy, and he's been an inspiration and a leader for many people throughout the world. In Germany itself, as a nation, was one of the early countries to adopt legislation for protection of personal data and privacy. So Germany as a nation has played a leading role throughout the world over these decades with regard to data protection. Again, not only in Germany, not only in Europe, but moving beyond that, especially in this century, in the beginning of this century, which is when Peter took over that role globally. So Peter Schaar took this inheritance of Germany's leading role and really enhanced this tradition and expertise and visibility for the benefit of Germany and the wider world. Today, most of you in this room will know that approximately 90 countries around the world have laws relating to data protection and privacy. So it's there's a very strong global trend toward the enactment of data protection laws. For example, Latin America lit up during the 90s and especially the 2000s in terms of country after country adopting data protection legislation, and Latin American countries, one after the other, looked very much to Europe and to Germany's activities and the activities of Peter Schaar and his office. Now, I want to tell you that there is an organization in Germany which is called Deutsche Welle, which is the equivalent to the BBC World Service, as an example. They have called Peter Germany's data protection guru. That's how they think of him. And they have made clear that he makes his views very well known. He has spoken out against the blanket expansion of video surveillance across the country, against the so-called anti-terror database, against the agreement with the United States, which allows U.S. access to European financial data. So these measures have all had one aim: to gather more information about citizens, to collect it, to store it, to manipulate it, to use it. But Peter Schaar has consistently and persistently questioned this and questioned the relationship of the individual and the government and championed the protection of human dignity and liberty and freedom. Many data protection activists around the world also value Peter's work, and he has concerned himself, they made the point, not just with the bureaucratic and legal questions in the role as National Commissioner for Data Protection, but he has tried very much repeatedly and has succeeded in doing this in bringing the messages of privacy and data protection to the wider public. So even at the start of his tenure as Data Protection Commissioner, for example, he warned publicly back in the early 2000s about RFID chips, which are installed obviously in many, many places, and of many other technological innovations. So since we are in the United States, I want to ask the question and speak with you for a moment: what are the parallels or lessons for us in the United States of the experience of Peter Schaar and what he has accomplished in Germany? Germany is similar to the United States in many ways. It's obviously a leading economy. It's a dominant economy in Europe, a leading economy in the world. It has a federal system, as does the United States and Canada. He was the federal data protection commissioner, so at the national level, and he had underneath him 16 fractious data protection commissioners for each of the subnational units, each of the Länder in Germany. So as well managing that relationship of a subnational and regional data protection authorities as well, all jockeying for position and power and notice. So we can say that when we think about data protection and privacy, there are some core concepts that are especially relevant in the United States. One, privacy is a human right. We tend to forget that or want to ignore that in the United States, but that is absolutely clear, and the United States is a signatory to several international conventions that reaffirm that. Secondly, the United States had a very, very strong role in beginning and pushing and urging other countries, encouraging them to become active in the area of protection of data and personal information and of privacy. In the era of the beginning of computerization in the mid-'70s and the early '70s, the United States really pushed and began this most recent global trend that now is not concluded, but as I said, has 90 countries around the world. And that was evidenced, for example, in the United States by the 1974 Privacy Act. So the United States was playing a leadership role. Most unfortunately, over these succeeding decades, the United States is now the outlier of the very strong global trend to protect privacy and personal data, and it is obvious to all, including people inside the United States, but also their trading partners and others around the world, in the absence of protection of privacy and personal data in the United States. The third point I want to make is that US companies obviously operate all over the world, and they must comply with the laws. And so US companies operating in Europe, for example, comply with the data protection laws in Europe. So we have this anomalous situation where US companies are protecting the privacy and personal data of people outside the United States in these 90 countries that have data protection laws, including in Europe, much better than they are protecting the privacy and personal data of Americans. And I will tell you that US companies in Germany protect the privacy and personal data of Germans, and Peter Schaar made sure that they did so. So why should we in the United States not enjoy the same level of protection as others around the world do? The United States needs a Peter Schaar. We need a thoughtful, rigorous, principled, independent, visible commissioner to represent the people in the United States. And not just as consumers. We tend to often be reduced in the dialogue today to consumers, as if that's all we are. That's all we are consumers. But in all the many varied, rich, important aspects of our humanity, as consumers, certainly, looking for a deal in America, that's part of the national consciousness, but also as family members, as lovers, as parents, as children, as siblings, as workers, as citizens, and so forth. So Peter Schaar has kept in mind and honored and protected not only our role as consumers, but these many, many aspects of us as human beings and the society that human beings have created. And for that, we thank him tonight. Thank you, Peter.
Well, it is very hard for me to respond on this kind of introduction. Thank you very much, Deborah, to both Deborahs. Thank you very much also to Frank and to Mark. I'm very honored. I feel very honored for receiving this very important Brandeis Award. Well, I had the chance today to deliver a keynote to the Health Privacy Summit. So I try to be brief here. At first, I want to deliver some words on my personal background. I grew up in West Berlin. Western Berlin was that part, perhaps few of you remember, that did not belong to the Soviet Imperium. And my parents were grateful to the United States for defending their liberties against the Nazis, the liberation, and against the authoritarian system of the Soviet Union. So they experienced personally 2 surveillance states. And they were happy that I, as a child, had the chance to grow up in a democracy. And I had personal rights, I had personal freedoms, and our society could discuss freely about controversial issues. I think this is essential for every democracy. And therefore, there's a connection, an interconnection between privacy issues, freedom of information, and democracy. You cannot divide them. If there's a lack of privacy, you have to fear that even you are discussing privately about things. This will be known by others, perhaps by the state, and if you are preparing protests, you are writing an article, if there are agencies looking on the text from behind you or via electronic means, this is a really heavy threat to even the public or the free opportunities for public opinion and for public speech. As Mark pointed out, Mr. Brandeis, Judge Brandeis, formulated the phrase, sunlight is the best disinfectant. This means freedom of information. And he also formulated much earlier, many years earlier, the right to be left alone. So that's a privacy issue. Both together are very important, and there are strong links between both. We are now witnessing new threats. We are coming from technology, coming from business interests, coming from security interests. And now we have to reconsider the right balance between the different contradicting interests and values. But at the end, there must be democracy and freedom and humanity and human dignity. Therefore, we have to need to use all chances to improve those developments in favor of these values. Well, we are discussing between Europe and the United States recently, well, we have discussed the free trade zone between the US and Europe, this transatlantic trade and investment partnership. One of the last times I visited Washington as federal commissioner, I met Cameron Kerry. Cameron Kerry is the brother of your foreign minister, and he served as a high-rank politician in the Department of Commerce. Many Europeans fear that this TTIP will undermine their rights, consumer rights, privacy rights, and so on. But my reaction was different. I said to him, oh, good idea, this transatlantic free trade zone. You have the chance to improve your privacy rules. Then we come to a common level that is good for free trade. He was completely surprised. His understanding was, well, European privacy is overstated. I think we in Europe can be proud that we have developed a privacy regime that is very comprehensive. There are some lacks, and it is not really modern. But if we modernize these approaches, we go on to the current challenges, we have the chance, together with the United States, to come to a higher level of protection as well as for a better understanding of each other. We need both, and I think this prize is also a signal that you are not alone, and we neither. Okay, thank you very much again.